During his highly accomplished career as an RCAF and National Research Council test pilot, John Croll flew 55 types of aircraft as varied as his beloved CF-104 Starfighter, the A-10, CF-18, and Convair 580, while conducting a range of research flying, from military avionics testing and weapons delivery to contaminated runway friction tests and storm and climate change projects. John was born in Montreal in 1948 to parents Bruce and Winifred Croll. He graduated in engineering physics from RMC with the Governor-General's Gold Medal. After pilot training, he was posted to Canada's Aerospace Engineering Test Establishment, ATE, where he conducted cold weather trials of the Bell 212 helicopter and flew a modified T-33 with the Alberta Hailstop project. From ATE, John commenced fighter pilot training. He took quickly to high-speed flying and on his 7th transition flight successfully flew the CF-104 to Mach 2. John was well on his way to a European posting when disaster struck. During a simulated attack flight in May of 1973, he hit a tree and ejected at high speed. Although John had sufficiently recovered a month later to proceed on his tour in Germany, the head trauma he sustained later led to a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease. As part of Canada's Cold War commitment to NATO, John flew low-level missions with 441 Tactical Fighter Squadron and was a graduate of the Fighter Weapons Instructor Course, Canada's equivalent to the U.S. Navy's Top Gun. John attended the USAF Test Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base, California in 1976. His performance on the year-long course was exemplary. So was his competitive spirit. John was the first non-American to top his class, receiving the prestigious Lethan Tittle Award. Remaining at Edwards on exchange with USAF 6512 Test Squadron, John flew test operations, as well as conducting special weapons drops using an F-4. Much of his flying during this first year involved safety chase missions, perhaps the most interesting being flights in an A-37 on the wing of the Boeing 747 modified to carry the NASA Space Shuttle Enterprise. Early in 1978, John joined the A-10 Combined Test Force. He led more than 20 projects, including flight, weapons, control, and instrumentation tests as part of the United States Air Force's early flight and development evaluation of its A-10 fleet. Returning to Canada in 1980, John was posted to ATE as a qualified experimental test pilot and head of aircraft flight test for Canada's fixed-wing aircraft fleets. He flew sorties testing new CF-104 navigation and attack systems, and once CF-18 started arriving, he became the senior CF-18 test pilot, designing and carrying out all projects testing the new fighter. Promoted to lieutenant colonel in 1985, John held a series of managing positions, but the experimental test world beckoned, and he retired from the RCAF in 1988, immediately joining the National Research Council's Flight Research Laboratory. With the FRL, John flew in support of Canadian Space Agency astronaut microgravity training, providing astronauts a repeated 30 seconds of weightlessness. Closer to Earth, he flew extensively a specially equipped Convair 580 to gather data on icing and storms as part of the Canadian Arctic Storms Program, the Beaufort and Arctic Storms Experiment, and the Canadian Freezing Drizzle Experiment. During the 1998 ice storm that shut down eastern Canada, John flew daily, saying that the most dangerous part was driving the icy roads to the airport. A major part of John's work involved test flying in the service of safer takeoffs and landings. To this end, he developed innovative curved precision approaches using a microwave landing system, and in a collaborative test conducted by the US FAA and Transport Canada, he determined that GPS could be used for precision-guided airport approaches in both Canada and the United States. Perhaps the most important testing John carried out was a 5-year study on winter runway friction on contaminated surfaces.
From a pilot's perspective, it basically means an enhancement to flight safety. We currently have some estimated data on aircraft landing performance on contaminated strips, but we don't have exact data that pilots can use from their handbook that will tell them what the increase to the landing distance is going to be, or what the effect of a rejected takeoff is going to be if they have to do it on a runway that's covered with snow or ice. So we're trying to learn more on that condition, and as a pilot, basically it means to me that we'll know more about the conditions that exist at the airport where we land and the effect that those conditions will have on the performance and safety of the aircraft itself.
Working alongside international partners, his team flew some 275 full anti-skid aircraft braking runs on 70 contaminated surfaces with 10 different types of commercial aircraft. John's work established the Canadian Runway Friction Index, which improved the safety of winter landings worldwide. By the time he retired from flying in 2001, John had amassed over 7,300 flying hours in the advancement of military and civilian aviation, and had authored more than 20 technical publications. In recognition of his contributions to aviation, John was presented with the Transport Canada Safety Award and the McKee Trophy. In 2019, he was made a Fellow of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. Athletic, with a fine sense of humor, a carpenter, and an outdoorsman, outside the cockpit, John is quiet-spoken and modest about his many accomplishments. A proud husband, father, and grandfather, John and his wife Anne have 3 daughters and 9 grandchildren. For his career as a test pilot with both the Royal Canadian Air Force and the National Research Council of Canada, and his contributions to both Canadian military and research aviation, John Croll was inducted into Canada's Aviation Hall of Fame at ceremonies held in 2022.